Why are intelligence agencies pushing for more encrypted communication tools? Let's head to Chicago. We're joined by Rick Jordan, CEO of Reach Out Technology. Great to have you here on Ticker.
Good to be here. Thank you.
Please just start by explaining the vulnerabilities that exist in traditional messaging systems that we all use at the moment, like SMS.
Absolutely. We found out a couple weeks ago, actually, that in the United States, at least, the Verizon, the FBI said Verizon, AT&T, and I think around 6 other telecom providers were hacked by China. And they were able to see in plain text messages, information about phone calls, who the United States population was talking to. It's been a little bit uproar with this entire scenario, and now to the point to where the FBI is actually trying to crack down a lot. And the Biden administration is even saying, hey, we're going to retaliate now against China. But this has not been something new. I want to emphasize that. Text messages have always been just out there in the open. It's not a vulnerability thing. It's just a matter of sending an email. Just like emails, anybody could potentially read your emails because they are not end-to-end encrypted. And that's been the biggest warning by the FBI right now, is that use something different.
I'm interested in the fact that it's especially apparent between platforms like iPhone and Android.
Yeah, for sure, because everybody uses one or the other, right? That's really the only 2 platforms that exist in the entire world globally. And from iPhone to Android, we've seen with the release of iOS 8 this past year that there's now RCS. You know, there was this big excitement because now we can hold and put a little heart emoji or a thumbs up or 2 exclamation points, and now that it syncs back and forth between iOS and Android. The problem still is that that is still out there. It is not end-to-end encrypted. And even with Android, this is why the FBI said, you know what, don't even use those. You know, Android, when you're going from Android to Android, it doesn't matter if you're in the US, if you're in France, if you're in Australia, if you're in China, it doesn't matter. Even on Android to Android, those are still wide open. I know Google says they're not, but there's so many different updates, and the Android community is very fragmented with different software packages between Samsung or Google phones themselves, like the Pixel. There's just no consistency like there is with the iPhone. And that's the difference, because if you're going from iPhone to Android or Android to iPhone, you need to use a different app to make sure that your messages cannot be read.
Rick, talk to us about how the vulnerabilities pose a risk to national security, particularly when it comes to hacking of government officials and also political figures.
For sure. That was one of the big things that we discovered, at least that the FBI discovered, was one of the biggest vulnerabilities is China was able to actually see the text messages and phone call records of specific political figures. They haven't released who those political figures were, but I think we could probably take a guess, especially with this being an election year. It's not too hard to connect those dots. This is something that's been happening for a long, long time. It's just that they just discovered it now. And actually, even though it was just reported a couple weeks ago, you know, towards the end of November, beginning of December, this hack took place in the springtime and the summertime, and that's when the FBI started their investigation. It usually takes this long, and that's the problem with these kinds of things as well, is that any sort of bad actor, meaning a country, a nation state, or even just a hacking group, like this case that was from China, they're usually in the system for months before somebody can tell, which means that political figures have been talking back and forth for that long of a time, and now it's just being noticed.
All right, so what should we all be looking for when it comes to security for apps? What should we be looking for?
That's a great question, my man. I mean, I have an iPhone 16 Pro right here, and if it's blue, you're good. iPhone has always been encrypted end-to-end with iMessage specifically. So if it's blue, it's good. And actually, they just announced earlier this year, Apple did, quantum level security for iMessage. So even in the future, if there's quantum computers that can break through end-to-end encryption, this actually thwarts that. The next good one out there, and the FBI mentioned this, is actually Signal. And that's something that I've been using for years as well. You know, you can make phone calls, you can send chats, anything you want to do, and those are not stored anywhere. You know, I think personally that it has a leg up on iMessage, and the only reason is because in a country like we've been talking about with China, there's a local firm that's run by or influenced heavily by the Chinese government that actually stores those encryption keys for the iCloud backup. So if the Chinese government wanted to get access to any Chinese citizens' iMessages, they could just easily contact this firm. Signal, there's no backups. When it goes from your phone to somebody else's phone, doesn't matter if it's iOS, Apple, Android, whatever, those are never stored anywhere, period. Signal's the best, my man. And WhatsApp, man, I tell you, that's what the whole world communicates on, isn't it? Globally,
Yeah,
everybody
yeah.
uses WhatsApp. By far, the messages are end-to-end encrypted. Yes, that's great. However, Meta's been caught in the past looking at those messages. If you report one as just belligerent or bullying or whatever it is, reporting a message, it sends those messages in plain text out to Meta, meaning Facebook. They can pretty much see things when they want to. And that was an investigation a couple years ago. Even though the government can't necessarily see them, Meta still has a way to be able to see those messages. So iMessage, if it's blue, you're good. Signal, the other one, and ironically, that's also blue messaging. So anything blue, man, you're good.
Keep it blue, like your background. All right, talk to us just finally about increasing cyber literacy among the general public. Why is it so critical in adopting secure communication methods effectively? Because it's not just about one side of a party having this. Both need to, and we probably all need to.
We really do, and this is something that's starting to become more prominent now, of course, because as we see more of these things in the media, like the hack that just happened with China and the US, we see these things all the time now, and it doesn't really matter what country you're in. Even in the war between Russia and Ukraine, one of the biggest things that Russia did before they actually physically invaded the country with ground forces is they hacked the banking system. And all these poor Ukraine citizens woke up in the morning showing $0 in their bank accounts. That was a form of psychological warfare, really reduce the morale of the people that you're about to invade and then go in and hit them hard with your military. So there's a lot of things that we can do. I always say that some of the best things, at least in the United States, always freeze your credit report, because then there's nobody that can access that, do any kind of identity theft without knowing about it, without you knowing about it. And then you can just easily unfreeze it when you need to go get a vehicle, get a new credit card, whatever you want to do, and then freeze it up again. But start to do that. There's a lot of great people online. You can go to YouTube and just type in cybersecurity awareness, and you'll see some very simplistic videos to teach you about what you need to do every single day. But the best thing, I tell you, really any country, freeze your credit report. That way nobody can open accounts under your name without your consent.
All right, Rick Jordan, it's a wide world out there. Thanks for joining us from Chicago. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for having me.